Alright, good morning, boys. Hope you had a good weekend. And it's time to get back to some notes. Today we're going to be covering something very different. Well, not very different, but kind of different. It can get a little confusing, so I'm going to split it into two parts. Today we're going to be looking at the simpler part of the how to graph sine functions. There's a couple things that you need to learn, so just pay close attention. Alright, so this is how you're going to this is how a sine function is written. So it's written as y is equal to a sine, right, bx, oh, there's a parentheses there, bx minus c plus d. Alright, so today we're just focusing on the things that's outside the parentheses. We're going to be focusing on A and D. So what is each thing? A is equal to amplitude. B is equal to frequency. C is equal to horizontal shift. And D is equal to vertical shift. Alright, so this is just some vocabulary that you're gonna you don't know what this is, so you need to know some vocabulary to find this. But the first thing that I need you to know is how a graph of y equals sine looks like. So if you grab a calculator, if you plug it in, y equals, you just put sine of x, it's gonna look like a wave. Alright, but this is how we're gonna do it. So if I go here, sorry, that right there, I'm going to teach you how we're going to be able to know this. So we're going to graph y is equal to sine of x. Alright, so in this case there's no a, there's no b, there's no c, and there's no d, right? So that means that we're going to have 4 points. Alright, you always start off with these 4 points. Oh, 5 if you want to include 0. So this one, okay, so this is going to be pi over 2. You're going to have pi, you're going to have 3 pi over 2, and you're going to have 2 pi. Alright? These are the 4 key points you're going to know when there's no shift. Now, in this case, when you think about your unit circle, the highest it ever got was 1, and the lowest it ever got was -1. Right? So, that means that the highest it's going to get is 1, and the lowest it's going to get is equal to -1. Alright? Now, if I think back, at 0, sine equals to 0. At pi over 2, sine is equal to 1. And then at pi, it equals back to 0. And then at 3 pi over 2, it equals to -1. And at 2 pi, it equals back to 0. So here's the key. Every graph of sine equals x is going to look similar to this. Alright? It's not going to be exact, but it's going to look very similar. Alright? So that means it's going to have the same form. This is how sine of x, this is the parent of the graph. This is how it's going to compare to. Alright? The only thing that's going to change is the amplitude, the frequency, the horizontal shift, and the vertical shift. But like I said before, the only thing we're worried about today is only the amplitude and the vertical shift. Alright? So here's some vocabulary that you need to know. Alright? The first one is called the midline. What is the midline? So the midline is just okay, so a midline of a sine function is the horizontal center line about which the function oscillates above and below. For y equals sine of x the midline is y equals 0. Alright. It's parallel, so the midline is parallel to the x-axis and is located halfway, this is important, halfway between the graphs max and min. So that means the highest point and the lowest point. It is affected by any vertical shifts of the graph. So, for example, right, I have y equals sine of x plus 3. Alright, so how do I know that it's a vertical shift and not a horizontal shift? Well, you got to look at it like we did with quadratic equations, alright, with polynomial equations. If it's inside the parentheses, that means that it's a horizontal shift, alright? But if it's outside, that's vertical. That's going to go up and down. So that's the thing. So you look at here, this plus 3, is it inside or outside? Well, it's outside. So that means that it's going to be a vertical shift, alright? So if I graph both of these, I'm going to graph my y equals sine of x and y equals sine of x plus 3. So if I do my graph right here, I have, what's it in blue? If I have this right here, make it big so you guys can see it. Alright, I'm gonna start off with the points. So the four extra points that I need is pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Alright, this is not changing today. Alright, now the thing that's going to change, well, let's first start off with, so let's do points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Alright, so the only thing that's going to change is my vertical shift. So let's start off with the regular y equals sine of x. So y is equal to sine of x. Alright, so like I said, you start off at 0, here at 1, you go back to 0, you go to negative 1, and you go up to 0. So it looks like this. Alright, here's where the change comes. Alright, so if I look at this, my vertical shift is at 3, right? 3, 4, and 5. So if I start off here, this is going to be my new x-axis. Alright, so this is all it's going to do with the vertical shift, just gives you a new x-axis in quotations. This is where you're going to go. This is your new 0, where it's going to start and where it's going to end. That cycle is going to end. Alright, so what I do is, when that vertical shift is given, you're going to draw a line at that point, a horizontal line at that point. Alright, so you're going to go here, right across. Alright, just like that. Now, as you guys can see in the regular sine, you went up 1, right, and down 1 and stuff like that. So this is you're going to do the exact same thing here, but this is your new 0. So instead of starting here, you're going to start here. Alright, so 0. And then at pi over 2, it went up to 1, so you go up to 4. Right, because it went up 1. And then it came back down to 0. Now, at 3, right, so you went up 1, but then you're going to go to the minimum, so you're going to go down 1. So you're going to go down to 1 to 2. And then at 2 pi, you're going to go up to 0. So see how these are exactly the same, just with a vertical shift, right? So this is what happens with the shifts, right? That's all it does. It just moves that little graph, the graph that you have, and it's just going to move it up, all right? Now, another word you need to know, the amplitude. It's the vertical distance the vertical distance from the midline to the highest or lowest point on the curve. The magnitude of the wave of a function, of a sine function, of a sine function. So how do you find the amplitude? So amplitude equals 1/2 absolute value of the max minus the minimum. Alright, so if I do this graph again, so if I want to put this right there, alright, I'm going to have, if I'm going to do the y equals sine again, so y equals to sine of x. So you should be good with it by now. So the 4 points, I need pi over 2, I need pi, I need 3 pi over 2, and I need 2 pi. Okay, so then I need 1 and negative 1. Alright, so here, I'm going to start here, 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 negative 1, here. Okay, so I need to show you something. This right here, from the highest to my midline, this is the amplitude. Alright, so I know the amplitude is 1 because I imagine there's a 1 in front of the sine. Okay, so that you're multiplying it by 1, so I know that my amplitude is 1. That's how high it's going to go up, and then how low it's going to go. Alright, so the amplitude here has to match also the amplitude here. Alright, this is also 1, but it's negative, but it's the absolute value, so it's going to be 1, right? So that is how much it's changing. Alright, now for example, let me show you an example real quick. Okay, if I want to graph y, y is equal to 4 sine of x. Alright, see how there's a number in front of it, so that means there's going to be a change. Alright, there's going to be an amplitude change. Alright, so if I look at this, I know that my amplitude, so my A, is equal to 4. So that means it's going to go up 4 instead of 1 and down 4 instead of 1. Okay, it's going to be that kind of change. Alright, but the one thing that's not going to change are the points that I'm using. So pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Alright, so let's do these. 1, 2, sorry. There it is. 3 So I'm going to start off at 0. Alright? But I know my amplitude is 4. So that means that the highest is going to go is at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I look at my pi over 2, and I'm going to put that point at 4. Alright? So that means that this has to equal 4. Right? Now, that point, and then I'm going to go down back to 0 because we don't have a vertical shift, and the amplitude here has to be 4. So this point is going to be at -4. It's going to go back up to 0. So once I connect my dots, I have this. Right? So see how these two are similar, right? They have the same shape, but this one's just longer, right? Because the amplitude is just changed in it. That's the only thing that changed. Alright? So I just need you to pay close attention to that. So we already looked at what happened if you have a vertical shift, what happened when you change the amplitude, but now I want you to see what happens when you do both. When you have a amplitude change and you have a vertical change. Alright, so you can put both. There's some equations that you're going to have a 4, but don't worry about that yet. We'll get there later. Now I just want you to worry about the amplitude and vertical shift. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to combine both. So this is how we're going to do it. I have, for example, y is equal to 4 sine of x plus 1. Now, of course, you would know now that this is a vertical shift and not a horizontal shift because that's the only thing covered. But remember, it is outside the parentheses, so I know that's a vertical shift, and the 4 in front of it is telling me that there's a change in amplitude. So my amplitude is equal to 4, and my vertical shift, so in other words, the d is equal to 1. Okay, so now let's graph this. Oh, wrong color. Once again. There it is. That's pretty good. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, right, is I have to focus on my vertical shift because that's going to be my new midline. That's going to be my new x-axis. Alright, so I'm going to label all these points that I have. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I'm going to go here, -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5. Let's get rid of that 6. Okay. Then I'm going to put my points, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Alright, so like I said before, the first thing I have to do is figure out my amplitude. Alright, I mean my vertical shift. So I'm going to create my new midline. So my midline is at it's at 1, right? Because it went up 1. So you're just going to go to 1, and you're just going to draw a horizontal dotted line on it. Okay. Now that I got that out of the way, right? Because that's the new vertical shift. I know that that's where it's going to start. That's where my new point is going to start. Right there. Now, we got to work with our amplitude. Alright, so we have that it's 4, so you're just going to add 4 to it. So at pi over 2, instead of going to 1, it's going to go to, or at 4, if it started at 0, it's going to go to 5 because you got to add 1. So your pi over 2, you're going to go to 5. Alright, and then it's going to have to come back down, right? Because that's how it looks. It goes up, and it comes down at pi, at 0. Regular would be equal to 0, but now since we have a vertical shift, it's going to equal to 1. Okay? Then, at this point, alright, the amplitude changed, right? from 4, and we had a vertical shift. So how do I know what my next point is? It's pretty simple. All I have to do is my vertical shift, right? So it's either, so you want to figure out the points is going to be plus the amplitude. So the next point is going to be the points that the highest and your lowest is always going to be your vertical shift plus the amplitude, and then your lowest point is going to be the vertical shift minus the amplitude. Alright, so in this case I had 1 plus 4, right? So vertical plus amplitude, so it's 1 plus 4, which is equal to 5, so that's how I got this one right here. And then I had the vertical minus the amplitude, so this is how I'm going to get my other point. So in this case 1 minus 4 is going to be equal to negative 3. So that's how I know. So then I have to go to 3 pi over 2, and it's going to be at negative 3, somewhere around there. And then the last one is going to go back to there. So if I graph this, it's going to look like this. Alright, so that's all I have for now. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. This is the easiest it can get for now. So this is what happens when you have a vertical shift and an amplitude change. Alright, y'all have a good one. I'll talk to you later.